Hey nerds, we're talking about the season 2 premiere of Star Trek Strange New Worlds, episode 201, The Broken Circle. We're going to review it and then get into a spoiler breakdown of the episode starting now. Welcome to Nerd Social. I'm Nathan.
And I'm Khandra.
Hey, so the spoiler-free logline for this episode is a distress call from Lieutenant Noonien-Singh compels Spock to disobey orders and take the U.S.S. Enterprise and its crew into disputed space, risking renewed hostilities with the Klingons in a bid to aid their shipmate. This is written by Alonso and Akiva Goldsman. This and directed by Chris Fisher. So, Khandra, what did you think of this episode?
I thought it was a great reintroduction to the crew of the Enterprise. And I was immediately, I think, reminded of why I enjoyed the first season of this show. It's, I think, of all the iterations of Star Trek, TOS is the campiest, and this definitely plays to that in a lot of respects. So it was fun to reminisce and good to see them setting it up for conflict on in the season. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I liked it as well. So at this point, when this goes live, my review of the first 6 episodes would have gone live, and you can probably find that there. I'll put a link. And what I will say in that is there's something resolved a little bit quicker than I thought it was going to be resolved based on how things were set up at the end of the season last year. And also my conversation with the showrunner, I thought there, and I'm not going to talk about what specifically it is until we get to the spoiler part. It was resolved a little bit quick for me. But besides that, I thought it was a really good episode. Unlike some of the episodes from last year, we didn't have the framing device of someone talking and that is that person's episode. We get a log at the beginning, but the log at the beginning has nothing to do with what's happening in the episode. It's not attached. The person who gives the log isn't the focus of this episode. I was actually thinking about who the focus of this episode is, and I guess if I had to think about it, it's probably M'Benga, followed by Chapel, because they get a whole act together, a whole act of this episode by themselves. But of course, there are other people also that play a big role in this episode as well. I think Ethan Peck playing Spock also has a prominent role in this episode. There's a fair amount of, I guess, callbacks, if you want, to combat to Star Trek canon in this episode as well. And of course, complex runs happen quite a bit. In TNG, there were several episodes that we're always on the brink of war, or the Federation was always on the brink of war with the Klingons. Also episodes, of course, in DS9 as well. So it's a very common trope that writers of Star Trek go back to. But also there was some subterfuge there as well. So there's also episodes that have to do with spy stuff that TNG and also DS9. So yeah, it was a good episode. I think it was a good reintroduction to this type of storytelling for Trek, coming off of Picard, which was a very long arc. So yeah, I understand this is not as serialized as Picard. And when I spoke to Henry, he's very specifically said we're not going to turn into a very serialized show, which I appreciate. But like I said, there was like one thing here that I thought was resolved a little bit quicker than I would like. But as I also will mention or have mentioned in my spoiler review, I've only seen the first 6 episodes. I don't know if it's resolved, if there's a little bit more breathing room for that thing later on in the season, like in 7, 8, and 9. Yeah. So how would you rate the episode?
I would give this a 7. Yeah. Actually, probably a little bit more, because the end scene, the end credit was really nice touch and just reminded you of the origins of Trek and what it means for people. Yeah. So I don't know. Actually, that was like, oh yeah, I think this is the type of storytelling that drew people in originally.
The end credit, you mean after it cuts to black?
Yeah.
It's not much of so this is the first episode back since Michelle Nichols died, so there was a little tribute to her at the end of this episode. A little bit of a spoiler, but of course they have to do that. They have Uhura in this show, and I think Picard did it as well. I think Picard maybe did a tribute to Anna Wershing. Now that I'm thinking about it, the actress who played the Queen, because she died just before the show went live. Yeah, that was a nice little touch at the end. So you're saying 7 or 8?
I would say 8 actually. I feel like this was really, especially the action in it, because M'Benga and Chapel, I think you don't usually see a medical crew or the doctors, but it was a pretty exciting episode, pretty exciting opening for the season.
Yeah, I thought about this a little while as well. It wasn't like the all engines running or anything, but it had a lot going on, a whole lot going on. So I landed on our road trip as well at 8. Also, I could definitely see going to see this, and it would be a satisfying watch at the theater. It actually is about 60 minutes, a little bit less, 60 minutes. So it was a nice, healthy episode. Yeah. All right, let's get into breaking it down. If you enjoyed the conversation, please like, share, and subscribe. We really appreciate it. And with that, spoilers ahead. I was trying to dance around the you mentioned it a little bit in passing that M'Benga and Chapel are beating people up. It's like you said, a little weird that and it's also, so if you're watching this, you may have also, as I mentioned, watched or listened to the interview with Henry, where he mentions M'Benga's arc this season. So he definitely mentioned that the Klingons were coming, and it's going to be a completely different side of M'Benga. You get to see how the war affected him to a great degree in this episode, because like I said, there's a whole act. I think it's act 3 3, where it's just him and Chapel on the ship. That whole act is almost like 15 minutes of them fighting death to death with Klingons.
Yeah, after taking a performance-enhancing
exactly,
drug. Yeah.
Anyway, so we start with a captain's log, and this is what I was talking about earlier, where the captain's log really has nothing to do with the episode. He sets up the season, though, because like I said, I've seen other episodes, and he mentions here that there seems to be some sort of hostility, and we see that at the end of the episode. What Admiral April and also I think it's Commodore, what is his name? Commodore, I have it in my notes here. Commodore Ho or something, I think? No, Teflon. We're looking at, we get what they're looking at the end of the episode. And then we get this conversation between him and Una. And this isn't resolved until the second episode. And not much of a spoiler, seeing as how Paramount has released part of the trial online. So he goes away at the beginning of this episode, and then we don't see him we don't see him at all, actually, in the rest of this episode. So this is going to be finished up or actually continued in the next episode. So he puts Spock in charge, and Spock seems very reluctant to be put in charge, even though they're parked in space dock. And he even says, what do humans say, famous last words? I guess the other thing that's going on here, and this is why I said Ethan Peck is probably the third person that it's focused on. It starts and ends with him, but there's a bunch of other things going on when it's about him, I guess, in his command, the episode. But so it's hard for me to, I guess it may be a two-hander, because the whole middle section is Mbenga and Chapel, and it begins with Spock and it ends with Spock, but it's Spock interplaying with a bunch of other people. So it's right here, it's him and Mbenga telling him you have to deal with your emotions using music. And I guess this is the writers of the show trying to basically explain he has a liar of the TOS show, because he plays music with Uhura in the TOS show.
At first his look could hypnotize, and then his touch would vaporize. His alien love could victimize.
But you're also, as he had in the first season, and Mbenga discusses that a bit with him, right? He did have to break emotions, right? So regain that control. So coming off of all of these things that have happened to the crew as a whole, but him personally, and trying to get a handle on that, I could see how it would be challenging. And even though he knows, right, I feel like you almost come to expect drama, you're in space dock, right? Something's gonna go wrong, and certainly sure enough it does. So he just has this premonition that something was about to happen.
I think mostly his issue is that if something goes wrong, he's afraid that he won't be able to command the ship as well as he would have if he had his emotions in check.
Spock, do not follow me.
What's going on?
I'm warning you, back off.
I think that's his main concern. And then we have a little bit more of the ongoing love triangle story intercede here when Chapel comes in, which I also talked to Henry about a little bit last year. But I guess we get a little bit of the story. His adrenaline or whatever shot up. I don't even know what it was on the mod. His heart rate. Yeah, his heart went up when she came into the room, and then she shuts down that conversation. So apparently she's going to go off to a Vulcan, not retreat, a Vulcan. I don't know if it was an intern fellowship. I think she's a doctor, like a nurse, like a doctorate nurse. Because she said something last season about having done research in genetics or something like that. I think it was a fellowship. And although she becomes a doctor in Star Trek 1, like the Star Trek of the movie, Nurse Chapel becomes Dr. Chapel. And of course, Maquis says something sexist about he wants a nurse who will follow his orders, so he doesn't want Chapel anymore.
I hear Chapel's an MD now. Well, I'm going to need a top nurse, not a doctor who'll argue every little diagnosis with me.
And
that's one thing they couldn't get rid of.
Yeah, so we're on the bridge here, and Uhura doesn't want to give up her station to the inspection, and then this is when we get the message from Lahan, which, as you said, resolves the premonition that Spock was having, that something was going to go wrong. April won't let him go, and then he basically tells the crew that he's going to steal the ship, and that's the end of the teaser here. He gives them the option to report him if they want to. In all these situations, no one ever said, you know what, I'm going to report you. So I guess they go along with stealing the ship, and that's the end. And then Act 1. And this is a very short act, actually. So they try to take over the ship, and I guess this whole act, I think the purpose of this act is basically to introduce you to Commander Pelia, who's going to be the new engineer on the ship, in her weird, quirky way that's completely different than Hammer. So yeah, they have some interesting things coming up with her in the next few episodes. But even here, she makes an impression that she knows that they tried to steal the ship.
Yeah, she's like, listen, you're going to have to step up your game if you want to make this look good. Let me tell you what.
Yeah, you vent plasma and this. So yeah, and then she actually gets them to, makes it more convincing, as you said, and they are instructed to move away from space dock for the safety of everyone else. They steal the ship. Yeah. And that's pretty much the end of that. There's some other funny things there. Oh, the very end. I forgot about the very end here.
I love how they've made this a thing now across all the new tracks. What you say.
Yeah.
When you think about it, it's your first
Yeah.
time, right? How are you going to say that, is worthy of the moment, and you like sending your ship into whatever? And of course, Spock does not disappoint. It's quite hilarious. I just still potentially.
I want the ship to go now. Oh yeah, he's I think they've only made it a thing recently because they've realized that. Because I don't think I'm pretty sure that Kirk said engage a few times, and actually Pike said engage because I was watching the pilot of TOS like last week.
Yeah,
he says engage in that episode. I think they make it his thing in Discovery, and I think they make it his thing because Picard had a thing, like a very specific thing. But I think Kirk did a bunch of different things.
I think Kirk mixed it up.
He had a lot of different things, if I remember TOS correctly, and some of it was like carry on or whatever. So, but Picard had a very specific thing, so now they're making everyone have a very specific thing. Because I don't even think Archer had if I remember Broken Arrow correctly, he told Trip to take us out. He didn't really say anything that memorable. But yeah, in this era, they're making everyone have a thing.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
It's also hard that making the shows so distinctive, right? Because we've not had this much track all at once. And so one of the things I really like in the sense is each show is distinctive, the uniforms, the look of the ship. And so it makes sense, and it just makes it a little bit more fun to watch in general, especially if you're watching all of them.
So it is interesting to say. I think Friedman still hasn't decided on hers. There was an episode last season where she was trying to couple out, if I remember correctly, just like Saru was trying to couple out in season, I think 3. Anyway, so they go to the disputed area, which is the lithium mining colony, where Federation and the Klingon Empire switch on ownership or mining rights, I guess. This is part of the treaty of the war. And they connect with La'an, who was here drinking this Klingon under the table. So the other thing that I discussed with Henry was the look of the Klingons, because at the time, I think we hadn't gotten a trailer for Picard yet. So I didn't know at the time whether or not they were going to change Worf. And it didn't change. These actually don't look like Worf either. They look like a hybrid between the TNG version of Klingons look like and also the Discovery version. And he said that it was for production reasons. It wasn't because of backlash. The only thing I can think of why they should look based on what he said in our conversation is because there's a lot of Klingons in this episode. And I think that process that they were doing where they had actually put like a whole thing over someone's head would have just been very onerous for this one-off episode. And I don't know how often they're going to have Klingons in the show, so maybe that this is just a quicker thing production-wise to do than forecast people, because the Klingons that they had in the first season of Discovery kept showing up, so putting in the work to create masks for them, just like they created a mask for, I forget, in the 3rd season of Discovery, the Orion, the woman.
Osira.
Yeah, so it was a very similar process. Instead of painting her, they put a giant mask over her head, so they would have had to do that for every one of these people. So I can imagine that would have just taken just too long. So they decided to change it up. But the ridges look very similar to the Discovery ridges too, though. They're like more pronounced across the face. So anyway, she drinks this guy under the table, and this is where they also have varying skin tones, which is another thing Discovery did, as opposed to like making everyone like brown face or black face.
Yeah, but it's like it's a much appreciated detail, right? It's like humans come from colors. Why can't even the Orions? They had different shades of green. It's hello.
So this actress is obviously black. They colored her close to her complexion, and instead of making everyone that complexion, you can see this guy is a lighter complexion. I don't know if this is a white guy, but they didn't try to make him and everyone else that dark, which is, like I said, not that far off from doing blackface or brownface. So this is when Omega connects and she explains what the issue is here. Apparently Federation and Klingon people are plotting to restart the war for financial gain. I was thinking about where else I've seen something like this, like Federation people that plotted against the Federation. There was the Maquis, of course, in Deep Space Nine and also in TNG, but I can't really think of anyone else besides, we've seen a lot of Starfleet officers act unethically from time to time, especially admirals tend to be evil. There was also that Voyager episode, Equinox, where they were acting unethically.
Janeway clung to her morality at the expense of her crew. Maybe you should learn from that mistake.
Her only mistake was trusting you.
But it's usually not for like financial gain, so that's interesting and new. That's a new wrinkle. But we did see in the movie The Undiscovered Country, Klingons and Federation officers plotting to restart a war. It was basically the same plot. Like they couldn't accept that the war was going to be over. The Cold War was going to be over. At the beginning of the movie, Kirk was on that side of the argument. He was like, let them die because they're and then they plotted to kill the Chancellor.
You cannot prove anything. You have betrayed the Federation. All of you. Klingons cannot be trusted, sir. You said so yourself. They killed your son.
So it seems like there's always like a war almost being averted between the Klingons and the Federation.
I think they make themselves easy targets, right? Because they're easy to goad into war, whereas some other species would be a lot more cautious, just less inclined. But the Klingons are like, nah, you wouldn't have to do much to instigate a war, and then from that, if you have, I don't know, ideations of, because it's always like new tech or new territory, or the motivations.
Because it's part of their culture. They like fighting, they like war. There's nothing more honorable than to die in battle. So this is so they split off to try to find more about the plot, and Bing and Chapel go and help Oriana's parents who got sick from radiation to lithium, because at this point we don't know what's going on. They get captured and taken down to this cavern, and Law trades some Federation weapons. We get the tidbit that they're collecting Federation technology, and then we find out in the next act why they're collecting Federation technology, which was basically to build the ship that we see at the end of Act 2. So as you said, Act 3 is basically them fighting through the ship on drugs. And it's hinted at here that it's not the first time that they did this, because she asked him, do you ever not have it with you? And I guess he's traumatized by the war. He thinks it's always going to kick off, so he always has it with him, which is interesting.
Get ready if you stay ready. And he's just, I'm always ready. And one for...
They also get this little tidbit here where this guy who challenged that he was where he said he was, he said there was so much death that the air turned like red with the mist of like blood. So he's seen some things. There's so many fight sequences here. He also tortures a guy in the corridor, which again, not what you expect from the Doctor.
And he is so gentle, right? So you really feel the age and that whatever trauma that he went through really bubbling up in him, and Nurse Chapel having to stop him before he goes too far.
One of the things that I asked Henry, or one of the things I was trying to get at when I spoke to Henry, was about how he lost the job to McCoy. So maybe this has something to do with it. Maybe this gets the better of him, but we'll see. So he gives up the information that they want. Basically, they can't get to the bridge, so they decide to do something else here. They decide to send a message to the transponder, and then they're just like scene after scene of them. So he's working on this, and then she gives him some time to finish, and then she gets pinned down, and the director just slows down the things just showing that he's gonna like rampage through these people, and he does. It's like he wants to do, like he's reveling in it, basically.
You're never gonna have that opportunity where you can physically beat up this many Klingons, right? That's just for a regular human, that's unlikely, but he's in this moment, I'm gonna take out as many of that. And they also have to, right? There's
have to, but he's also, she's closing the door here, and he almost doesn't want the door to get closed. You can see his face here, like he wants more of them. I think now that I'm thinking about it, it's probably more of a Spock episode, but this is the part where I was like, this is where it's very focused on him and his thing, and to a certain extent her, but mostly him. So so they took off, and the problem here is that the ship that they created is going to attack this, I think this is a D7. This Klingon, it's not a bird prey, it's a D7. Also, Lahan notices it taking off here as well, and they also, I think in the previous scene, noticed that M'Benga and Chapel were missing. So this is when Uhura gets the Morse code message saying, Enterprise, destroy the ship. Spock puts it together that they're on the ship. They sent the message. They might still be on the ship, but they decided that it was important to destroy the ship because they want to avert a war. Because at the very beginning of this episode, it was again, Omega was talking about so many deaths for just a couple parsecs of space. So Spock surmises that they are okay with dying. But even though he makes that assessment, as we saw earlier on in the episode, since he's struggling with his emotions, he waits until the very last moment to actually destroy the ship, which is understandable. It's a very human thing. It's not a very Vulcan thing, but it's a very human thing, which allows them, of course, because this is a drama, to get off of the ship exactly at the right time and jump out into space. And also allows us to get a nice little space battle. It's really good. At this point, saying that the graphics with these shows are great, it's redundant. If the graphics weren't great, it probably would have gotten a lower rating for me, but this is a beautiful, I don't even know what this is supposed to be, lithium that they're flying through?
I guess that's what it might be, right? Yeah.
So they jump out into space with a thruster, and he decides to destroy the ship. And like I said, they get transported on. He reacts very emotionally here to Christine nearly dying, and also later on as well, when she's in the bio bed. And then we have the wrap up to this act, which is him convincing the Klingon commander here that the very weird that they did in front of him was for his benefit. I don't know, I would be questioning too, but I mean, he's making very logical points here, and he drinks with him after this as well. His makeup actually looks closer to the Worf than the Klingons from earlier on in the episode. Sorry.
Yeah, it's like a great scene with Spock being a diplomat, right? And recognizing you have to make sure that the Klingons at least believe you enough that they don't escalate the situation. for her, right?
Yeah. And then we have this little tag here with Pelia. Like I said, she's interesting. I forget the name of her race. Do you remember it off the top of your head?
So I thought they said Atlantean.
Which I feel is like a new
Atlantean.
thing. It's not Guinan's race. I think it's a new thing, right?
It is, because I couldn't find any information of it. So maybe I'll go back and listen again, but Atlantean is what I thought I heard. But yeah, very long-lived.
Yeah, and apparently she knows his mother, and that should be interesting as well as the season progresses. So he goes for another drink, and Oriana asks where she's going to go, and she's obviously going to go back to the ship. That's the one. So I was griping at the beginning of the episode. She went away, and it kind of like ran away in this penultimate episode. She shows up in the last episode because it's a time jump. But like, this is resolved in the first episode, and I was expecting something else. I was expecting like a longer kind of drawn out thing. I don't know. Are you satisfied with how she rejoined the crew, or do you think it was going to be like a bigger thing?
Yeah, I really like the character. So I think part of it is probably just being glad that she won't be gone for a very long time. I don't think she went off to do anything particularly interesting. I don't know. Yeah, so I wasn't miffed about it. I was like, okay, she's back. Yay.
I mean, she
I think especially because we saw her
in the last episode, right? Because there was a time jump. There was a time jump though. Like he was in an alternate future. There was just like 10 years in the future. So, but she left and she was gone a while, because the other thing I forgot to mention in the first act is Uhura finished starting academy and she's an ensign now. So she's apparently been gone for a while, but it's all off screen because she was in the last episode and she's in this episode. So I don't know. I thought it was going to be a bigger thing. I guess this is a sort of a big thing. It was a Klingon / Federation plot to restart the war, but I thought it was going to have something more to do with her backstory and the Gorn. And like I said, I've only seen
years or so. I said you still have a huge amount of time to go back and for them to do other things with the story.
Sure. And without spoiling future episodes, we get more with her, but I wanted to see more with that plot. And like I said, I haven't seen all the episodes, so there might be the last 4, there might be something else. That's the other shoe to drop. And actually, it might be because how this episode ends. So like, he gets his dress down from April, but like he also averted a war, so he doesn't lose his commission here. But we have this, after he's looking after Chapel here, we have this conversation between April and the Commodore about we didn't want to fight a war on 2 fronts, and we see the Gorn basically up on the monitor here. That's how they're going to pull her in later on, but we shall see. Yeah, and like you said, we have the dedication at the end, the very end here, for Michelle, for Sidor, shortest stories. Yeah, it was a nice little dedication. Any other thoughts?
I think we covered it. Like it was like a fun first episode. I feel like Strange New World, it's been great from the beginning, where I think maybe the other shows, and I guess when you're working with old material, maybe it's a little bit, I don't know, I don't want to say easier, but I guess the expectations are different. But the storytelling, the dialogue, and like there were moments in this episode where I like literally laughed out loud, right? Like it was very funny. So it's like the campiness of original Trek, but also like very serious storytelling and more,
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, more emotions, right? Like I think we talked about this last season, where they're not just, because they're going through traumatic stuff and they're acknowledging it, right? And dealing with it and working through it. And I think it makes for just a richer characters and richer storytelling instead of just jumping from one thing to the next and not really dealing with the impact of that. So seeing him, because his reaction in fighting Klingons, something deeper, it's not just like the offhand derogatory remark or hate that we've seen before. And just that definitely makes for more interesting.
Yeah, as I said to Henry when I spoke to him, I think the first season was probably the best season of Trek. They also only had to do 10 episodes as opposed to 22, but still, they actually knew what they wanted to do, as opposed to pretty much every show that has started, they were trying to figure out what they wanted to do, whereas like the first season, they knew what they wanted to do. And I think there was one episode last season that I didn't give an 8 or above, but pretty much every other episode was exceptional to me. And it's because they knew what they wanted to do, and they wanted to do episodic storytelling, but they wanted to fix the problem that TOS and TNG had, where like things happen and then it was like reset. It's like they're not telling arcs, but they're telling emotional arcs, as Henry said. So things affect people, and you get to see the ramifications of affecting, like the Chapel and Spock thing, or Mbenga and his daughter, or season is going to be Mbenga and whatever war wounds or PTSD that he has. You'll see that show up in episodes, or you expect it to, now that you've seen the first season of Strange New World. Yeah, I'm looking forward to the rest of the season. All right, so that is what we think, but we want to hear what you guys think. So please comment down below, like, share, subscribe, and check us out next week when we review the next episode. All right, and if you haven't seen my review of the first six episodes, you can check that out. All right, bye guys.
Bye.